November 25th, 1615. The great cathedral of Bordeaux trembles with the sound of wedding bells. But for you, a girl of only 14, the sound brings no joy, only fear. You stand beneath layers of heavy Spanish brocade, a gown so weighted with gold it feels more like armor than clothing. Your hands, still the hands of a child, tremble as attendants secure a jewel crown on your head, a crown so large it threatens to slide off at any moment. Through the haze of incense you glimpse your bridegroom, only the second time you've ever seen him, Louis XIII of France. Like you, he is 14, his voice barely changed. This morning, instead of preparing for the ceremony, he went hunting rabbits. Now, he avoids your eyes, staring at the stone floor as though it is far more interesting than the bride he is about to receive. Your Spanish ladies whisper prayers in Castilian, but their voices are swallowed by the thunder of the Latin Mass rising from the altar. Today you stop being Anna Maria Mauritia of Spain. From this moment, they will call you Anne of Austria. Even your name is stripped away, reshaped to fit a land that is not yours. Your father, Philip III of Spain, signed your fate away 3 years ago when you were only 11. Your dowry, 500,000 crowns, was calculated like a financial bargain, as if your worth could be measured in coin. Spain and France had thought of everything, except this, whether two frightened children might ever find comfort in one another. As the bells ring, one question hammers in your mind. Will I ever be more than a pawn? Will I ever know what it means to be truly loved? The marriage was decided long before the cathedral bells. August 1612. You were only 11 when your father told you, not asked but told, that you would marry the King of France. You were sitting in the gardens of the Royal Alcazar in Madrid, feeding breadcrumbs to your mother's beloved peacocks. Your mother, Margaret of Austria, had been dead less than a year, taken by childbirth fever. In her absence, you had become little mother to your younger siblings, guiding their prayers, managing their lessons, soothing them when they cried. And then your father's words fell like stones. You will be Queen of France. What did you know of France then? Only that it was a cold country to the north, where people spoke a language that sounded like water rushing over rocks. A land where the sun shone less brightly, where your Aunt Isabella had once gone as a bride and never returned. A country that had long been Spain's enemy, now pretending to be a friend through your marriage. The negotiations dragged on for 3 years. Portraits of you were painted and repainted to ensure you looked properly Habsburg, properly innocent, properly fit for a Bourbon king. In 1613, Louis's portrait arrived at the Spanish court. A pale boy with a weak chin and sad eyes, drowned in lace. Your ladies whispered that he was sickly, that he preferred the company of his falconer to that of women, that his mother, Marie de Medici, ruled France while he still played with toy soldiers. But such details mattered little. The papers had been signed. Your fate was sealed. October 18th, 1615. The proxy wedding in Burgos. You stood before an empty chair draped with French lilies, while your brother Philip acted in Louis's place. At the very same time in Bordeaux, Louis was marrying your sister-in-law, Elizabeth of France. 2 princesses exchanged like rare birds, each flying into exile. You wore your mother's wedding gown, altered to fit your smaller frame. The golden fabric clung to you like a burden too heavy for your young shoulders. The archbishop's Latin words washed over you, words you barely understood, words that ended with your whispered, "I do." You pledged yourself not to a boy, but to an absence, to a throne you had never seen, to a husband you did not know. Then came the journey. 40 days northward in rattling carriages through rain and mud. Nights spent in strange beds that smelled of other people's lives. Days filled with foods that grew stranger the farther from Spain you traveled. Your ladies tried to cheer you. Dona Estefania, your mother's loyal friend, Dona Catalina, who had taught you French, and little Maria de Montemayor, your dwarf companion since childhood. They sang Spanish songs, taught you French dances, held you when you wept in the dark. And then, the island of Pheasants, a narrow strip of land in the Bidasoa River, belonging to neither Spain nor France. A stage built above the water, where you stood between 2 worlds. On one side, your brother Philip. On the other, your new French guardians. Philip embraced you one last time, whispering, "Be brave, little Infanta. Remember, you are Habsburg blood." And then you walked away from Spain forever. Across the wooden platform came Elizabeth of France, weeping as she left her home for yours. Two girls crossing paths above dark water, each heading into exile. The French court was nothing like the warm, candlelit world of Madrid. When your carriage rattled into Bordeaux, the streets thundered with cheers. But the smiles around you were not for love. They were for politics. Spain and France had traded daughters like bargaining chips, and the people came to see if the gamble looked beautiful. And there he was again, Louis XIII, 14 years old, slim, stiff, his clothes too heavy for his narrow frame. He bowed politely, kissed your hand quickly, and stepped back as though you carried a fever. You tried to smile, to catch his eye, but he turned away to speak to his hunting companions. At court, the strangeness deepened. Your Spanish gowns, with their wide skirts and stiff collars, looked foreign beside the looser, flowing French fashions. You moved slowly, formally, trained to walk with the dignity of Madrid. The French ladies, in contrast, laughed loudly, danced freely, and whispered behind their fans that the new Queen of France was proud and cold. Even your language betrayed you. You spoke French haltingly, with a heavy accent of Castile. Each mispronounced word drew smirks. You clung to your Spanish ladies, whispering the familiar softness of your mother tongue, only to be scolded by your new mother-in-law, Marie de Medici. You are Queen of France now, not Spain. Speak French. But Louis's mother was harsher, still in other ways. She did not trust you, nor did she wish you to have influence over her son. She filled the court with her Italian favorites, Cardinal Richelieu among them, while you were pushed aside, a foreign ornament rather than a partner in power. The first evenings with Louis were awkward. He avoided conversation, preferring to polish his hunting gear or train his falcons. When you tried to speak of books, of music, of the saints you admired, he stared at the fire in silence. The French nobles whispered that their young king preferred the company of men more than of his wife, and though you tried to ignore it, the distance between you was real. Loneliness crept into your days. You prayed long hours in the cold stone chapel, the candles flickering on your pale face. You wrote letters back to Spain, begging for news of your siblings, longing for the warmth of the Spanish court where you had once been cherished. But now, you were Queen of France in name, stranger in truth, and in the quiet of your chamber, you asked yourself, if my husband cannot look at me, if his mother despises me, if this court whispers behind my back, what am I here for? The marriage was celebrated with feasts and fireworks, but the true test of a union was the bed. On the night of your wedding, you were led into the royal chamber, your gown unlaced by whispering attendants, your hair unpinned until it fell across your shoulders. You were only 14, your heart pounding, your hands cold as ice. The chamber was crowded with nobles, courtiers, and bishops, all present to witness the ritual of a royal couple being put to bed. The curtains were drawn, the torches dimmed, and the crowd retreated, leaving only you and your new husband in the suffocating silence. Louis did not speak. He lay down stiffly beside you, smelling faintly of hunting dogs and damp leather. You waited, trembling, praying for some sign of warmth, of affection. None came. He turned his back to you, and within moments his breathing slowed into the rhythm of sleep. The court buzzed with rumors by morning. Had the marriage been consummated? Was France safe from the shame of a barren queen? No one could answer. You said nothing. Louis said nothing, and the silence grew heavier with each passing day. Loneliness became your closest companion. In a palace filled with glitter and laughter, you were isolated. You were surrounded by ladies you could not trust, nobles who resented your Spanish blood, and a husband who treated you with cold formality. Even when he did visit your chamber, he stayed only briefly, sometimes saying nothing at all. The humiliation cut deep. Your most intimate life became a matter of state gossip. Courtiers whispered that you were too shy, too clumsy, too foreign to please him. Others accused you of being frigid, unfit to give France an heir. Each word was a blade. You found refuge only in your Spanish ladies, Dona Estefania, Dona Catalina, and little Maria. They comforted you with songs and stories of home, but even they could not shield you from the sharp eyes of the French court. Marie de Medici ordered that their presence be reduced, that you learn to live like a Frenchwoman. Piece by piece, your old life was stripped away. At night, lie in a vast, cold royal bed, you press your rosary between your fingers and whispered prayers into the darkness. God, give me strength. God, give me a child. God, let me not be forgotten. But the silence answered you back, night after night. The court of France had one demand of its queen, an heir. From the moment you entered the royal household, every look, every whisper, every judgment circled around your body. Would you give France a son? The pressure weighed on you like a crown made of iron. In 1619, after years of coldness, Louis finally came to your bed with enough regularity to raise hopes. When word spread that you were with child, the bells of Paris rang, and prayers rose in every church for the safety of the unborn heir. But joy turned to ashes. In the 6th month, you suffered a miscarriage. Alone in your chamber, writhing in pain, you felt life slip away inside you. Courtiers whispered that it was your fault, that you had not taken proper care, that your Spanish habits had weakened you, that you were unworthy of being France's mother. Louis's face was pale with disappointment, but not tenderness. He did not comfort you. Instead, he stalked away in silence, as though your body betrayed him personally. The years dragged on with more pregnancies that ended in sorrow. In 1620, another miscarriage. In 1622, a stillborn daughter. Each time, the court turned colder, sharper. The people muttered that France had married a barren queen, a cursed Habsburg who would never carry life to term. And each time, the blame fell not on Louis, but on you. Doctors prescribed bitter draughts, strange powders, endless prayers. They ordered you to rest, then scolded you for idleness. They warned against riding, dancing, even laughing too hard, lest a frail hope within you be shaken loose. But nothing saved your children. The loneliness deepened into despair. Louis visited you less and less. Sometimes weeks would pass without a word from him. He devoted himself to hunting, to music, to his favorites, leaving you abandoned in your cold apartments. Once, in a rare moment of vulnerability, you cried before Donna Estefania, "If I cannot give France a son, then what am I? Nothing, a shadow in silk." And in the eyes of the court, that was the truth. The Queen of France was a failure, a woman wrapped in jewels but empty of life. But the story was not finished. Fate still had cruelties and miracles in store. By 1624, the game at court had changed, and the most dangerous player had entered the stage. Cardinal Armand Jean Duplessis, better known as Richelieu, tall, gaunt, with piercing eyes and a mind like a steel trap. He rose swiftly to the favor of Louis's mother, Marie de Medici, and soon became the king's most trusted advisor. His presence transformed the palace into a battlefield of whispers and alliances. For you, Richelieu was no friend. He distrusted your Spanish blood, your Habsburg loyalties, and your habit of corresponding secretly with your brother, Philip IV of Spain. France and Spain, though bound by marriage, were still rivals. To Richelieu, you were not just a foreign queen. You were a potential traitor. He watched you closely. Your letters were intercepted. Your ladies were questioned. Spies were planted in your chambers, disguised as servants. Even your prayers at the chapel were reported back to him. You were a queen, yet you lived like a prisoner under suspicion. Louis, increasingly dependent on Richelieu, grew colder still. The cardinal fed his fears, whispering that you were dangerous, that your womb had failed France, that your loyalties belonged across the Pyrenees. The distance between you and your husband widened into a gulf. Yet you were not without courage. You clung to your dignity, moving through the glittering halls with the grace of a queen, even as you felt the dagger of Richelieu's gaze at your back. You wrote letters to your brother, disguised in codes and carried by loyal friends. You kept alive the memory of Spain in your private chambers, your rosaries, your Spanish books, your whispered prayers. Still, the pressure was suffocating. Every smile at court was a mask, every word a possible trap. You walked carefully, silently, knowing that one false step could end not only your influence, but perhaps even your life. And yet, fate had one weapon left to give you, something Richelieu himself could not control. A child. The birth of your son had secured your place, but fate was not yet finished with you. In 1642, Cardinal Richelieu died. His iron grip on France finally loosened. A year later, in May 1643, your husband, King Louis XIII, followed him to the grave. He was only 41, wasted by illness, his body as frail as his affection for you had always been. For the first time in your life, you were free of him, but you were not free of responsibility. At his deathbed, Louis XIII had tried to bind your hands. He distrusted you still, even after you had given him an heir. His will decreed that the government of France would not be in your care, but in the hands of a council, ministers and nobles chosen to restrain the Queen Mother. But you, Anne of Austria, were no longer the frightened girl of 14, nor the humiliated barren queen. You were the mother of the king, and you would not be silenced. With the support of the Parliament of Paris, you overturned your husband's will. You claimed the regency for yourself, ruling on behalf of your 5-year-old son, Louis XIV. When you walked into the Parliament, veiled in black mourning, your voice steady, your dignity unshaken, you won them to your side. At last, you held real power. The court shifted overnight. No longer an ornament, no longer a shadow. You were the regent of France. You turned to a man you trusted above all others, Cardinal Mazarin, Richelieu's successor. Where Richelieu had been your enemy, Mazarin was your ally, perhaps more than an ally. The whispers at court suggested you shared more than politics, that the bond between queen and cardinal was not only a state, but a heart. Whether true or not, Mazarin became your shield, your advisor, and your constant companion in the storm to come. Because a storm was coming. The great nobles of France resented a Spanish-born queen ruling over them. The Parliament, once your ally, would turn restless. And soon the kingdom would be thrown into chaos. The Fronde, a civil war that would test your courage, your cunning, and your will to keep your son's throne secure. But in that moment, standing at the head of the regency, black veils trailing behind you, your young son's hand in yours, you felt something you had never known before. You were no longer pawn, no longer victim. You were Queen of France, regent, and mother of the king, and the fate of France now rested in your hands. By the mid-1630s, your life seemed cursed. You were nearing 40, long past the years when most queens bore children. Years of miscarriages had left you weary, humiliated, and whispered about as la reine sterile. The barren queen, Louis had all but abandoned hope. He visited you rarely, sometimes only out of duty, sometimes not at all. France prepared for the possibility that the crown would pass to his brother, Gaston, a man the court distrusted, but who at least had children. And then, against every expectation, your belly began to swell. At first, you dare not believe it. Too many times you felt life stir, only for it to vanish in blood and grief. But this time was different. The doctors confirmed it. The court trembled with astonishment. After 23 years of marriage, the Queen of France was truly with child. Your enemies whispered that it was impossible, that you must have taken a lover. Richelieu spies spread rumors that the father was not Louis, but one of your attendants. But the king himself dismissed the gossip, perhaps out of pride, perhaps relief. He accepted the child as his. For the first time in years, he visited you more often, spoke to you with something like gentleness. You spent those months in constant prayer, clinging to the Virgin Mary, promising pilgrimages if only the child might live. You limited your movements, surrounded yourself with relics, begged your ladies never to leave you alone. France itself seemed to hold its breath. And then, on a summer morning, September 5th, 1638, after long hours of labor, you gave birth. The bells of Paris thundered, cannons roared, and the people wept with joy. A boy, an heir, the Dauphin of France. He was christened Louis Dieudonne, Louis God-given. To the world, he would become Louis XIV, the Sun King. To you, he was simply your miracle, the fragile child you held against your breast with trembling hands. For the first time, you felt what had been denied you all your life. Triumph. You were no longer the barren queen, no longer the failure whispered about in corridors. You were the mother of the future king of France. And though Richelieu still watched, though enemies still plotted, though the court remained treacherous, you had secured your place. At last, you were not just a pawn in the game. You were a queen who had given France its future. The regency had begun with hope, but France soon turned against you. By 1648, resentment boiled over. The great nobles, humiliated for years under Richelieu and now mistrustful of Spanish-born queen, plotted to reclaim their power. The Parliament of Paris, once your ally, demanded limits on royal authority. They called their movement the Fronde, named after the children's slingshots that shattered windows in the streets of Paris. At first, it was a game of words and decrees, but soon it became war. Mobs filled Paris, crying that taxes were too heavy, that the court was corrupt, that you and Mazarin were bleeding France for your own gain. The nobles, Condé, Conti, the Duke of Beaufort, rallied armies, not for people, but for their own ambitions. France fractured, court against parliament, nobles against crown, brother against brother. Through it all, you stood firm, dressed in black velvet, a rosary always in your hand. You faced down the parliament with calm defiance. They hissed at you as the Spanish woman, but you answered with dignity. I am the mother of the king, and I will not abandon his throne. When the violence grew too close, you made the most painful choice of all. You fled Paris in the dead of night with your children. The young Dauphin, your precious Louis, clutched your hand as you hurried through freezing corridors, slipping into carriages under cover of darkness. The court followed you to Saint-Germain, where the palace was so bare that you and your children slept on straw. Your son never forgot that night. He was only 10, but the memory of fleeing his own capital, of being jeered at by his own people, carved itself deep into his soul. It would shape the monarch he would one day become. The years that followed were chaos. Armies clashed across France. Cities rose and fell. Nobles betrayed you one week and came crawling back the next. Even your own in-laws wavered in loyalty. Mazarin was hunted, exiled, cursed as a foreign parasite. And through it all, the gossip never ceased, that you and Mazarin were lovers, that he ruled in your name, that you were unfit to guide France. But you endured, you prayed, you negotiated, you wept in private, and then emerged in public with your head high. Slowly, painfully, Mazarin's diplomacy and your persistence wore down the rebellion. By 1653, the Fronde was broken. The nobles returned to court, humbled. Paris opened its gates to the king once more. You had won, barely, desperately, but you had kept the crown safe for your son. Yet the cost was heavy. France was scarred, your reputation stained, your son hardened by the taste of rebellion. The boy who had once clutched your hand in fear would grow into a man who trusted no one, not parliament, not nobles, not even his own mother. But for now, as the cannons of victory thundered, you could breathe again. You had survived treachery, exile, war. You had kept your son's throne. The Fronde was over. France, scarred and weary, had returned to order. And at last your son, your miracle child, was ready to rule. In 1653, Louis XIV was 15 years old, still young, still under your protection, yet already carrying himself like a king. You watched him step into manhood with pride, but also with a touch of fear, for the boy who had once clung to your hand in terror was becoming a man who no longer needed it. You guided him gently, advising him, shielding him, still ruling in many ways through Cardinal Mazarin. Together, you and Mazarin shaped the young king's education, teaching him disciplined politics and the art of kingship. The bond between you and Mazarin deepened. Rumors never ceased that you were more than allies, that love bound you in secret. Perhaps it was true, perhaps not. History will never know. What is certain is that you trusted him. And when Mazarin died in 1661, the grief struck you like a final blow. For years, he had been your partner, your shield, your friend, maybe even your heart's companion. You mourned him deeply, even as your son seized a moment to declare his reign absolute. With Mazarin gone, you stepped back. Louis XIV, now in his 20s, no longer needed a regent, nor a mother's guidance. He took France into his own hands, building a monarchy of unmatched power and splendor. The boy who once slept on straw during the Fronde now dreamed of palaces and sons. You, Anne of Austria, became the queen mother. Your role shifted from ruler to advisor, from protector to matriarch. You devoted yourself to your sons, Louis, now king, and Philippe, Duke of Orleans, and to your faith. Piety, which had always guided you, deepened in your final years. Prayer, charity, and the cloister silence became your refuge. Illness crept upon you. A slow, wasting disease ate away at your body, but you bore it with dignity, retreating often to the convent of Val-de-Grace, which you had founded as a monument of gratitude for the birth of your son. On January 20th, 1666, at the age of 64, you breathed your last. Your son, the great Sun King, wept openly at your deathbed. For all his pride, for all his grandeur, in that moment he was still only your child, mourning the mother who had carried him through storms and wars, who had fought for his throne when he was too young to fight for himself. They laid you to rest in the Basilica of St. Denis, among the kings and queens of France. Your story had been one of sorrow and survival, of humiliation turned into triumph, of a queen who endured suspicion, exile, and betrayal, yet who gave France its greatest king. You had been the Spanish bride, the barren queen, the regent scorned by her own people. But in the end, history remembers you as what you truly were, Anne of Austria, queen, regent, and mother of the Sun King.